veiled by the eternal ocean night, in the vast icy depths of the Atlantic where no sunlight ever reaches, a group of fearless explorers prepares for an incredibly perilous descent. Their mission: to unravel the mystery of a ghost from a past war, a long-sunken vessel that seemed to have been forever erased from humanity's memory. But as these brave divers penetrate the decrepit, rust-eaten hull, they discover something utterly unimaginable. Secrets buried for centuries on the seabed suddenly burst to the surface, ruthlessly debunking official narratives and forcing the world to ask the most uncomfortable questions, which still remain unanswered. What secrets does this eerie underwater tomb truly conceal? And why was its story so ruthlessly erased from all official records? Prepare for a thrilling dive into the very abyss of the unknown, where every new shocking discovery only deepens the intrigue, driving even the most steadfast explorers to the brink of madness. But before we delve deeper and unveil the main secret, make a crucial click, give a powerful like to this video, and immediately subscribe to our channel. Your support is invaluable to us. It helps us bring to light the most incredible and classified stories from the ocean depths. Imagine the perfect nightmare, forged from steel and secrecy, meant to sow terror in the most inaccessible depths of the ocean. An underwater monster that could appear from nowhere at any moment and vanish without a trace. We are talking about the legendary U-869, one of those ultra-long-range, deep-diving combat submarines that became a true symbol of Nazi Germany, the embodiment of its most sinister genius. It wasn't just a boat, it was a ruthless machine for destruction, specifically designed to spread panic under thousands of tons of water, all while remaining absolutely invisible and undetectable to the enemy. Its appearance in Allied waters heralded imminent catastrophe. It was a harbinger of chaos and destruction. It was a true behemoth, almost 76 meters of formidable military might, capable of diving to incredible, seemingly ultimate depths, inaccessible to most other vessels of that era. Its robust hull was designed to withstand the colossal pressure of the aquatic element, transforming it into an impregnable fortress beneath the waves. 6 torpedo tubes, strategically positioned for maximum devastation, were constantly loaded with deadly cigars, each carrying a payload capable of sending even the most protected transport or warship to the bottom, turning it into a heap of useless scrap metal in a matter of moments. And at the helm of this underwater monstrosity stood a captain whose nerves were tougher than steel itself, and whose resolve was more ruthless than the fiercest ocean storms. But even this invincible might could not save it from its ominous fate. The U-869 was specifically designed to be significantly larger and more powerful than any comparable vessel, with a single, cold-blooded objective: to stealthily penetrate the most heavily guarded enemy waters, sow absolute chaos among vital Allied convoys, and vanish instantly, leaving no trace of its terrifying presence. Each of its missions represented a meticulously planned operation to undermine the enemy's naval superiority, and its capabilities at the time seemed boundless, almost mystical. It was meant to be elusive, an absolute phantom of the depths, inducing paralyzing fear with just its potential presence. So where did this seemingly invincible, terrifying marvel of Nazi engineering disappear to? A vessel that, by all accounts, should have dominated naval battles and etched its name into the annals of victorious history, its mysterious disappearance became one of the greatest, most agonizing mysteries of World War II, haunting prominent historians, desperate searchers, and the families of those who went with it into the abyss for years. However, hold your breath, because things are about to get really deep, and what these brave divers ultimately found inside the vessel. Let's just say, official history wasn't just augmented, it was literally rewritten from scratch, and trust me, it's certainly not the version of events taught in schools and universities. Prepare for a shock, because what you're about to learn will forever change your perception of the final days of World War II's most enigmatic submarine. Its true fate still remains shrouded in the darkest mystery. According to dusty, half-erased military documents stored in the most clandestine archives, the ill-fated U-869 received its last, extremely dangerous assignment: to patrol the treacherous waters off the Strait of Gibraltar. It was a true hornet's nest, a narrow stretch of sea teeming with enemy vessels where it seemed even the very breath of the wind was infused with danger. Their mission was crystal clear and ruthless: intercept, disrupt communications, and, like a phantom, disappear stealthily, leaving only chaos and confusion in its wake. However, as is often the case in the bloody maelstrom of war, everything went horribly wrong. In February 1945, when the Atlantic was a veritable battlefield, a U.S. Coast Guard cutter jubilantly reported sinking a German U-boat discovered near Gibraltar. The Allies, without batting an eye, immediately claimed this victory, triumphantly patting themselves on the back for eliminating another Nazi submarine threat. They hastily, almost dismissively, assumed it was U-769, another, less significant target. The jubilant report was promptly archived, and the case, in their opinion, was solemnly declared closed. The world, it seemed, could breathe a sigh of relief, but this was just the first slap in the face of truth. But oh my God, how wrong they were. It wasn't the U-869, not the one that was supposed to be there. And for decades, for generations, no one, absolutely no one, dared to question that report. Not the mighty U.S. Navy, not renowned historians, not even the desperate families of the 56 German sailors who were supposedly swallowed forever by the Gibraltar waves along with the U-boat. Its story was just another line in the endless list of World War II casualties, another seemingly forever buried mystery within the pages of that dreadful conflict. There were no confirmed sonar signals, no wreckage, not a single photograph, just meager official military documents. And if you've ever had the dubious pleasure of reading those accurate military reports from that era, you know full well accuracy wasn't their strong suit, especially when the Atlantic had turned into a literal war zone, and people, dodging deadly torpedoes, were forced to guess coordinates blindly in absolute chaos. Officials then simply declared the U-869 case closed, striking it from all lists as if it had never existed. But the actual U-869 was redirected, its course altered, and, oh horror, it never received that critically important message. What truly happened will shock you to your core, forcing you to reconsider everything you thought you knew about that war. The final fateful mission of the ill-fated U-869 was marked by absolute chaos and fatal misunderstanding, as if ill fate had pursued this vessel even before it set sail. Originally, on December 29, 1944, the Supreme Command of U-boats, amidst growing disarray on the fronts, issued a clear ironclad order. The U-869 was to patrol the icy waters off the coast of New Jersey, thousands of miles from its supposed demise. This was a secret, strategically vital raid into the heart of American waters. But oh horror! Due to suddenly arising concerns about critical fuel limitations and the changing naval situation, this order was literally rescinded a few days later, consigned to the dustbin of history. Instead, the U-869 was instructed to drastically shift its patrol zone to west of Gibraltar, strictly excluding the strait itself, which was swarming with enemy ships. This was a decision that, as it later turned out, became one of the war's most chilling mysteries. But this was just the first blow of fate. Despite numerous desperate attempts to contact the U-boat, the U-869 never confirmed receipt of these updated vital orders. The last contact with the underwater monstrosity was recorded on January 10, 1945, when it only reported on its fuel supply, but critically said nothing about its current position or confirmation of the new patrol zone. It was an ominous silence, portending disaster. As a result, the German command, in a state of total confusion and despair, hastily but mistakenly assumed that the U-869 continued to operate somewhere near Gibraltar. After its ultimate disappearance, they, without much thought, concluded it had been lost precisely there in those treacherous waters. This false conclusion, like a death sentence, sealed the fate of the vessel and its crew for decades, consigning them to historical oblivion. For the next 40 years, 4 entire decades, the U-869 remained nothing more than a ghost ship, a mere vague whisper in old moldy documents that no one dared to cross-check. The families of the lost crew had no graves, no wreckage to mourn their sons, husbands, and fathers, only a name etched on a memorial, and a bottomless chasm of unanswered questions that burned in their hearts, even the most authoritative military historians, as if lost in a labyrinth of lies, couldn't reach a consensus. Some blindly adhered to the Gibraltar version, refusing to admit error, while others, the bravest and most persistent, began to dig deeper, attempting to unearth the shocking truth. And what they finally found off the coast of New Jersey decades later literally turned everything upside down, blowing up official history and making the world reel from the realization of the extent of the misconception. It was a discovery that forever changed the perspective on one of the darkest chapters of World War II. Let's transport ourselves to the legendary summer of 1991, a time of scorching heat when immortal classic rock hits blasted from every radio, filling the air with a carefree mood. Somewhere off the picturesque yet treacherous coast of Point Pleasant, New Jersey, a group of obsessed thrill-seekers, for whom weekends were merely an excuse for incredible adventures, was preparing for a fateful, astounding discovery. What they were about to find would forever overturn decades of the most carefully concealed military history. This was a team of truly passionate, almost insane wreck divers, true fanatics of the deep for whom marine expeditions were more than just a hobby. These guys approach deep-sea exploration with the same maniacal passion others devote to fantasy football. It was their life, their blood, their ultimate calling. Among them shone the names of John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, two of the most respected and, dare I say, most reckless wreck divers on the entire east coast of America. They were far from ordinary beach bums interested only in suntans and light breezes. These men were true technical divers, which in essence means only one thing. They willingly, by their own volition, plunged into pitch-black impenetrable darkness, into freezing deadly traps hundreds of feet below the ocean's surface just for fun. That summer, their grand objective was the relentless exploration of uncharted, mysterious shipwrecks that, like shadows of the past, were scattered across the seafloor. They were armed only with the most advanced sonar of the time, an iron perseverance bordering on obsession, and some incredibly dubious life insurance that probably wouldn't have been worth a thing in the event of real trouble. And now imagine, the waters off the Jersey coast are not just an expanse of sea, they are a true underwater graveyard. A vast boundless dump of the past, where every square meter conceals its eerie secrets. Here one could stumble upon shipwrecks from great wars, victims of merciless storms and the most terrible maritime disasters, scattered across the ocean floor like forgotten metallic ghosts, forever frozen in their tragedy. Each such object is a silent testament to human courage, mistakes, and inevitable demise, when their highly sensitive sonar registered a long, perfectly smooth and suspiciously uniform point, approximately 60 miles offshore. At an incredible depth of 230 feet, it wasn't an absolute shock in itself. After all, there were dozens of similar objects in that area. However, this was unusual, even anomalous. The image that ominously appeared on the screen suspiciously, almost terrifyingly, resembled not an ordinary fishing vessel, but something far more ominous and larger. A full-fledged submarine, but this was just the first blow, a harbinger of what awaited them. Their first, long-awaited dive to the wreck turned into a complete, utter failure. The current was too powerful, ferocious, literally knocking them off their feet, and visibility in that abysmal void was so poor it felt like plunging into a thick, impenetrable darkness. Everything down there felt utterly wrong, alien, and terrifying. It was unbearably cold, pitch black, and the metallic structure they found was horrifyingly twisted and densely entangled with miles of old rotting fishing nets, like a spiderweb caught in a time trap. Just imagine, crawling through an abandoned, freezing metallic cavern where you can only see 3 feet ahead, and where every cautious step could lead to inevitable disaster. That's how that dive felt, that ominous descent into the unknown. But the divers, even in that utter darkness, immediately realized these weren't just random debris, not a pile of useless junk. This was something colossal, something immense, something that would forever change their lives and their understanding of history. Silence. This is where things get truly interesting, or rather truly chilling, when John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, trembling with cold and shock, finally returned to the surface and began their agonizing research. Absolutely all historical records screamed the same thing at them. Nowhere nearby, not within hundreds of miles, had a single German U-boat been lost. This was unheard of. It defied common sense. According to the sparse yet supposedly infallible Allied records, the last known U-boat activity at that crucial stage of the war was on the complete opposite side of the Atlantic, somewhere far off the Strait of Gibraltar. And that, mind you, is literally thousands of miles from the New Jersey coast. So what, for heaven's sake, were they actually looking at? What was this phantom behemoth lying beneath them if it didn't exist in official history? But this was just the second blow to their faith in history's infallibility. To make things even more mysterious, even more blood-curdling, there were no markings on the wreckage. No hull number, no nameplate, nothing that would in any way indicate it was a German U-boat that presumably had been there since 1945. Only twisted steel, forever sealed hatches, and the ominous echo of something long forgotten, something that shouldn't have been found. Yes, just twisted steel, frozen in a silent scream, and those hatches like the eyelids of a giant cadaver, forever sealing the truth. Chatterton and Kohler were too deep into this nightmare, literally and figuratively, because they had just found a real ghost submarine that, according to all documents, officially did not exist. It was as if history itself had decided to play a cruel trick on them, throwing them a riddle that made their hair stand on end. They nicknamed it Yoo-hoo, which fully reflected their bewilderment and absolute incomprehension. And from that moment, it became a true, all-consuming obsession, a goal to which they were willing to dedicate their lives. For years, they returned to this cursed site, diving again and again in incredibly dangerous, deadly conditions. This wasn't just an anomalous but a truly insane diving situation. These dives involved the use of the most complex mixed gases, the strictest millisecond-precise decompression schedules, and the constant, unseen yet ever-present threat of decompression sickness, suffocating hypoxia, or even worse, becoming trapped in the twisted, rust-eaten steel that could become their eternal prison. Each of these dives was a calculated, yet still terrifying risk. As if walking a knife edge, they slowly but surely, step by step, day by day, wrested its grim secrets from the abyss, and lo and behold, the wreckage began to reveal itself. First, pressure gauges with clear, unmistakable German inscriptions were found. Then, dials, metric as expected, and compartments that were eerily, almost pristinely preserved, as if time had frozen at the moment of its demise. And then, something happened that forever overturned their lives and understanding of the past. It was a discovery that made their hearts pound in a frantic rhythm, foreshadowing the main revelation: silence. Amidst all these incredible, shocking finds, among countless screws, rusty fragments, and eerily preserved details, a true, stunning breakthrough suddenly occurred that forever changed the course of the investigation. This was the moment when the obsession transformed into a tangible, blood-chilling reality. They discovered something seemingly utterly insignificant, a simple, tarnished dining knife lost in the silt and oblivion. But on its handle, like a mysterious message from the past, the name was clearly engraved. Horenberg, just one word, one name, but it was a true gut punch for the divers, a blinding flash of light in the utter darkness. It was at that moment that they truly shifted into high gear. Their obsession took on a new, fervent scale. They knew they had found a thread capable of unraveling one of World War II's greatest mysteries. This was just the third blow, foreshadowing a grand revelation. With the help of naval archives full of dusty, classified documents, and with the assistance of renowned historians who had wrestled with this enigma for decades, they desperately set about tracing that name. And lo and behold, their search led to Georg Horenberg, an actual crew member of the legendary U-869. What an incredible, almost mystical coincidence. This seemingly mundane, everyday object became irrefutable proof. They finally had irrefutable confirmation. The U-boat lying off the coast of New Jersey was indeed the long-lost U-869. But this answer, instead of bringing solace, only raised even more blood-chilling questions, as if opening Pandora's box. Why was it here? Thousands of miles from its official site of demise. What truly sank it, if not an Allied attack? And most chillingly, why did no one, absolutely no one, search for it in the right place for half a century? For long, arduous years, Richie Kohler and John Chatterton were literally obsessed with identifying the shipwreck they found off the coast of New Jersey. And while they certainly had deep, well-founded suspicions that it was indeed a German U-boat, no official records existed that could confirm a submarine wreck in that particular area. History, it seemed, remained silent, guarding its darkest secrets. That was until they discovered that cursed dining knife with the engraved name on it. This seemingly insignificant object, lost in the utter darkness of the seafloor, became a true ticket to the past for them. With just one simple dining knife in hand, they had their first tangible, undisputed piece of evidence that forever linked this ghost submarine to a real, living name. And this, like a trigger, led them to cross-reference additional, shocking data. They began poring over old, yellowed records from the WWII AG Weser shipyard, the very German company that once built the legendary U-869, as if excavating it from the Earth's womb. The divers meticulously cross-referenced serial numbers, until, lo and behold, they found U-boat engine parts that perfectly matched the manufacturer's documents. Every newly found rusty part, every tiny bolt, every decayed tube screamed one thing at them: it's her, it's the U-869. Every tiny detail found only confirmed it. This wreckage, which no one, absolutely no one, had been able to identify for years, was, without a shadow of a doubt, the very long-lost U-869, the one that vanished with its 56 crew members, as if swallowed by the ocean's bottomless maw, and whose story had been unjustly forgotten for decades. But this was just the beginning of a new, even more astounding discovery that was about to shed light on the tragedy itself. Silence, as the brave divers, like detectives in steel armor, pieced together the last, most painful fragments of this gigantic puzzle. Desperately trying to reconstruct the full, horrifying picture of what happened to the U-boat and its 56 sailors, they stumbled upon something even more shocking than all their previous discoveries. It was a revelation that sent chills down their spines. There was one crew member who, according to all documents, was supposed to be on board that fateful day. But, lo and behold, he was not there. His name was Herbert Kashevsky. He was officially assigned to the U-869 in the final catastrophe foreshadowing weeks before it set out to sea. He trained side by side with this crew, shared cramped quarters with them, heard their laughter and worries, memorized the very same emergency drills that were meant to save their lives. But shortly before the U-boat was meant to vanish forever into the ocean's expanse, Herbert fell seriously, almost fatally ill. This random, almost divine twist of fate saved his life, snatching him from the jaws of inevitable tragedy. But this was just the fourth blow, foreshadowing the most emotional discovery. Now, decades later, Herbert was living a quiet, unassuming life in Germany, completely unaware of the scale of historical misconceptions. He had absolutely no reason to believe his old combat U-boat ended up anywhere but the Mediterranean Sea. That's what the official version, which he, like everyone else, implicitly believed, stated. He simply lived on, oblivious to the secret buried beneath the waves. But then, like ghosts from the past, Kohler and Chatterton reached out to him. They, with incredible risk and persistence, contacted Herbert as part of their deepest investigation, not even certain he was still alive after all these years. And when they finally found him, Herbert was in absolute, unspeakable bewilderment. Everything he had been told for over 50 years, every shred of official information, completely contradicted what they were now trying to explain to him. His world, it seemed, had turned upside down. But the divers were armed with irrefutable evidence. They showed him photographs, eerie artifacts recovered directly from the wreckage, engine parts identified by serial numbers, and most importantly, that dining knife, the very one with the name Horenberg engraved on it, the name of a crew member he knew personally, with whom he had trained, and who, as he had always assumed, had ingloriously perished somewhere far away in hot southern Europe. And then came the shock. Herbert, with tears in his eyes, confirmed. It was Horenberg, the very Horenberg with whom he had bravely served. He remembered him clearly, down to the smallest detail. That small, time-darkened knife, forgotten in the wreckage for half a century, held more truth, more irrefutable evidence than any official military document, than any archival report. And Herbert, now a very old man, realized with horror that he had miraculously escaped an icy, watery grave, and that his friends, his comrades in arms, had died in a place where no one, absolutely no one, had even thought to look. He didn't give loud interviews, didn't chase sensational headlines, for his shock was too profound. However, he maintained constant contact with the divers, quietly but tirelessly working behind the scenes, helping to identify other crew members, as if resurrecting them from oblivion, and verifying the U-boat's provenance from the German side. His memory, his incredible insight, added something to this investigation that no database, no computer, could ever have provided. Herbert Gashevsky passed away in 2005, never having seen with his own eyes the sealed compartments that were discovered in the U-boat later, after his passing. Or perhaps he knew about them all along and simply never said a word, guarding his comrade's last secret. We'll never know for sure. But one thing we know for certain: it took only one dining knife to unravel one of the 20th century's greatest underwater mysteries. This simple, ordinary artifact became a mysterious key that unlocked decades of hidden, eerie history, extracted from the bottomless depths by two fearless divers who simply refused to give up. Yes, the dining knife led to the most terrifying yet true revelation. But what was sealed behind the U-boat's rusted doors will uncover something even more astounding and unthinkable, as John Chatterton, Richie Kohler, and their brave team, like fearless archaeologists, finally began to delve deeper into the wreckage of U-869. They weren't just plunging into rusted metal. No, they were plunging into chilling memories, into a silent tragedy frozen in time. The U-boat's interior was like an eerie, claustrophobic walk through a tight, corrosion-eaten tomb, where every step echoed with unspoken grief. The metal walls, which once reverberated with laughter, heated arguments, and the clanking of boots on gratings, were now motionless, silent, and piercingly cold. But lo and behold, they were surprisingly well preserved, as if death itself had decided to spare this final sanctuary. This was just the fifth most chilling blow, one that sent chills down their spines. Let's start with the berthing quarters. Cramped, dark, as if designed for sardines, not humans. Divers found bunks packed so tightly it seemed they could barely accommodate an adult man. In some, decaying mattresses still lay, silent witnesses to dreams and nightmares. And near several bunks, as if awaiting their owners, lay books, their pages irreversibly warped from decades spent underwater, yet still legible enough to read. One could almost hear the rustle of pages and the thoughts of those who read them. Next was the galley, or what remained of it. The scene was so eerie it defied description. Plates still on the table as if a meal had been abruptly interrupted, scattered cutlery, and one eerily well-preserved ration can, looking as if someone had just stepped out for a smoke break. Only no one ever returned. The air inside seemed thick with something unsaid, a kind of emotional trace that even decades underwater hadn't erased. These were no longer faceless Nazi officers from dry history textbooks, not just figures in reports. These were living people. Some were only 19 years old, others 22. These were mere boys trying to pass the time between grueling patrols, likely arguing over food or cracking insolent jokes about their superiors. Their lives, their hopes, their fears, all frozen in this metal tomb. In what was presumed to be a dark corner of the sunken vessel, divers found an open locker, its contents still ominously floating nearby as if awaiting touch. Inside were a pair of leather gloves, a rusty harmonica, a silent symbol of forgotten melodies, and a full deck of playing cards, surprisingly sealed in plastic. Just imagine, in the midst of war, under crushing pressure, surrounded by torpedoes and the expectation of death, someone found time to bring music to somehow drown out the submarine's monotonous hum. This was a true gut punch, irrefutable proof that life aboard U-869 was not just mechanical routine, but a full-blooded human drama, filled not only with terror but also with small joys. The control room, the submarine's brain, was a twisted steel cage of buttons, levers, and shattered glass. Most gauges were irretrievably smashed under the colossal pressure, but some still stubbornly clung to the walls as if clinging to life. Clear German inscriptions and metric figures were visible, and it all felt like being inside a control panel designed for the most brutal military operations. One could almost vividly imagine the crew standing there, fingers sliding over switches as icy orders were barked down the narrow, dark corridors. One of the most disturbing, most chilling areas was the torpedo room. Divers, with bated breath, discovered that several torpedo tubes were still sealed, raising more questions than answers. If they were under attack, why didn't they fire back? Why didn't they unleash a deadly salvo? If it was a fatal accident, what really went wrong in those final moments? The torpedoes themselves were long gone, some compartments inaccessible, but surrounding the submarine were these eerie, almost untouched signs of daily life. Things no history book ever mentions: boots still standing against a wall as if just removed, shaving kits, a rusty toothbrush, and a cracked mirror that still caught the diver's flashlight beam, reflecting shimmering light into the absolute darkness. A man most likely looked at himself in that mirror on the fateful morning the submarine descended into its eternal abyss. He likely adjusted his collar, smoothed his hair, and perhaps thought of home, of loved ones, of the peaceful life that awaited him on land. It was this part that haunted the divers most, the immense heartbreaking intimacy of the place. The tragedy frozen in every item. This wasn't just a shipwreck, it was a cry from the past. The very fact that the Atlantic Ocean, cruel and merciless as it is, preserved these remains like a hermetically sealed time capsule, astounded absolutely everyone. It was incredible, almost impossible. The low oxygen levels, piercingly cold water, and absolute lack of sunlight, all these conditions created an ideal, almost laboratory-like environment for preserving what by all laws of nature should have turned to dust decades ago. Rubber seals still clung to locker doors, as if protecting them from the invasion of time. Paper documents, though incredibly fragile, were still there, holding their secrets. Even some clothing, including uniforms with Nazi emblems and name patches, remained eerily intact, as if just removed from a person. And this was only the sixth most powerful blow to the mind. This is where the most painful, most agonizing moment arises. It is incredibly difficult to reconcile these ominous symbols, these signs of ideology, with the personal, so very human items lying nearby. It made everything so real it became unbearable. Not in a political sense, no, but in a painfully human, deeply personal one. These were not abstract characters from dry textbooks, not nameless soldiers. These were frightened young men trapped in a steel tube, ordered to fight for a crumbling, doomed empire. Some of them perhaps blindly believed in their righteous cause, in what they were fighting for. Others did not. They simply performed their duty, dreaming of returning home. But in the end it made absolutely no difference. The ocean cared nothing for whose side you were on, what ideology you adhered to, what flags flew above your heads. It took them all, indiscriminately, mercilessly, turning them into silent prisoners of its depths. U-869 was no longer just a military submarine, not just a number on a casualty list. It transformed into a true silent memorial, patiently waiting, buried beneath the waves, for someone brave and persistent enough to finally come looking for it. And thanks to these fearless divers, the voices inside this steel tomb were finally heard, resonating through decades of silence. Personal belongings, sealed torpedo tubes, and that very mirror which perhaps reflected someone's last terror-filled gaze. It was this part of the story that haunted the divers most, the intimacy, the poignancy of this tragedy. Everyone was struck by how much was preserved. As if time had frozen at the moment of disaster, the Atlantic Ocean, cruel as it is, held the wreckage sealed like an untouched time capsule. Low oxygen levels, icy water, the absolute lack of light, all of it, strangely, created an ideal environment for preserving what by all laws of the universe should have disintegrated decades ago. Rubber seals still clung to locker doors as if protecting the secrets within. Paper documents, though fragile, still existed, preserving final thoughts and words. Even some clothing, like uniforms with Nazi emblems and name patches, remained intact, sending shivers down one's spine. It is difficult, almost impossible, to reconcile these symbols of horror with the personal items lying nearby. This made everything unbearably real, not in a political sense, but in a painfully human one. These were not textbook characters. These were frightened, very young people, trapped in a steel tube, ordered to fight for a crumbling empire. Some of them likely genuinely believed in their mission, others did not. But in the end it no longer mattered. The ocean didn't care whose side they were on. It took them all. U-869 became not just a submarine, but an eternal memorial waiting for its time, buried under the waves, until someone came looking. And thanks to these divers, the voices inside were finally heard. Something went horribly, unimaginably wrong aboard U-869. But what if the real deadly threat came not from outside, but from within? Silence, personal belongings, eerily sealed torpedo tubes, and that very cracked mirror that perhaps reflected a final, despair-filled gaze. All of this, every detail, screams at us. Something went terribly, inconceivably, fatally wrong aboard U-869 in its final moments. But the main, chilling question remains. What exactly? What if the real, deadly threat came not from the ocean depths, not from enemy bombs, but from within the submarine itself? This was only the seventh most unsettling blow, foreshadowing the revelation of shocking theories. Imagine a submariner's nightmare. a trap that closed from within. It's time to unveil the most incredible, most controversial theories about the demise of this steel monster. Are you ready to learn the truth that still divides historians and makes even the most cool-headed experts shudder? Let's start with the most blood-curdling, most incredible, and chilling theory. One that still sparks debate and sends shivers down the spine of anyone familiar with submarine warfare. U-869 sank itself, but not due to sabotage or desertion. No, we're talking about one of the worst nightmares a submarine crew could ever imagine. A true suicide by a fatal twist of fate. A circular run torpedo. If you're not familiar with this nightmarish term, it essentially refers to a faulty torpedo that, instead of traveling straight to its target, suddenly veers off into an unimaginable, murderous circular trajectory, potentially threatening the very vessel that just launched it. Imagine the horror. You launch a torpedo, it takes a wild, unpredictable turn, and within a few agonizing seconds, it rips open your own coffin with monstrous force, turning the boat into a mass grave. This wasn't just a myth, but a known terrifying problem during World War II, affecting torpedoes from various navies, including both German and American. Several submarines were lost due to their own deadly weapons, serving as the most vivid, most tragic example of friendly fire gone absolutely, fatally wrong. It was a mistake whose price was life. Proponents of this chilling theory, and there are many, are convinced that U-869 either launched a test torpedo or, perhaps, even attempted a final, desperate attack. But alas, the torpedo's guidance system suffered a catastrophic failure. It made a wide, deadly circle, and with incredible force, struck the submarine directly, before anyone could react, before anyone could even comprehend what had happened. And most importantly, the damage divers observed on U-869's hull supports this blood-curdling version. The explosion, it seems, originated from within, crushing the metal and crumpling compartments as if they were an ordinary soda can stepped on by a giant. It was monstrous, inexplicable destruction that could only have been caused by an internal explosion. But this was only the eighth blow, foreshadowing even greater confusion. However, while this theory is absolutely horrifying and certainly plausible, it is, believe me, far from the only story ominously circulating within the submarine community. There are other versions that also give pause and challenge everything we thought we knew. There is also another, more official theory, supported by the dry records of the mighty U.S. Navy. It states that U-869 was mercilessly destroyed in a furious battle by American destroyers. According to this version, 2 American ships, the proud USS Howard D. Crowe and USS Coiner, engaged in deadly contact with the submarine on February 11, 1945, somewhere off the East Coast. They allegedly picked up faint acoustic signals, identified them as an enemy submarine, and then launched a coordinated, merciless depth charge attack, like a steel monster tearing its way from the ocean depths. After the war, when millions of military reports were cleaned and sorted, like receipts after tax season, with the same meticulousness and perhaps the same degree of creativity, this destruction of a submarine was officially, with great fanfare, attributed to the sinking of U-869. Naturally, this was supposed to be the end of the story, the final word in this grim affair, but oh how wrong they were. This was only the 9th blow, which shattered the official version. The fact is, the wreckage found by divers did not match the exact coordinates stated in those supposedly infallible Navy logs. It was close, yes, but not quite precise. And the more the divers explored the wreckage, the stranger, the more mysterious the whole story became. If U-869 was sunk by depth charges, then why were several torpedo tubes still sealed? Wouldn't a submarine in active combat, facing mortal threat, have launched at least one, its last weapon, to fight back? And if it had been caught by surprise, wouldn't there have been far more signs of damage from above rather than from within? Shouldn't its entire hull have been contorted by external explosions? This is where the waters get murky, and the pun is absolutely entirely appropriate. Because, yes, some parts of the submarine's outer hull did show deformations that could in principle correspond to the shockwave from a nearby depth charge. But alas, the extent of the damage didn't quite match what would be expected from a direct, destructive hit, and internally, as we recall, the greatest damage seemed to be sustained in the bow compartments. precisely where a wandering suicidal torpedo could have struck had it suddenly turned back towards its sender. So, we now have a real, merciless tug-of-war between versions. On one side, the chilling theory of self-destruction, which seems awfully plausible. On the other, the official yet so porous version of events from the U.S. Navy, and honestly both sides have their arguments, their points. But let's just say, these arguments are stained, semi-faded, and clearly missing several most crucial signatures. The truth, like an elusive ghost, slips through one's fingers, making one wonder, who is truly hiding the truth? What really fuels this already raging mysterious fire? It's the astounding, almost conspiratorial possibility that U-869 was operating under completely secret encrypted orders, having been redirected in the chaotic, dying final months of the war. By 1945, the German command was in complete, utter disarray. Communication was haphazard, orders changed faster than storm waves, and many logs were either lost, destroyed, or even worse, never properly recorded in that bloody maelstrom. So it is entirely, absolutely possible that U-869 was sent somewhere else, perhaps even toward the very shores of the United States, to sow panic and chaos. And alas, no one ever recorded it, leaving not a single trace in official documents. It would have been a complete, untraceable disappearance ordained by fate itself. This was only the 10th blow, revealing the veil of secrecy over the darkest secrets of the war. This shocking theory would not only explain its strange, anomalous location thousands of miles from its official patrol zone, but also the lack of defensive actions, and also, most importantly, the complete confusion surrounding who actually sank it. Perhaps the Navy did sink a submarine on February 11th, but alas, not this one. They could have destroyed another, less significant target, mistaking it for U-869, and this monstrous error remained uncorrected for decades. Then there's a darker, more sinister theory, with even less documentation, and far more speculation and conjecture, which suggests that U-869 might have been on some truly secret mission. Perhaps it was transporting some particularly valuable strategic materials, or, even more terrifying, deploying saboteur agents onto the American coast. No one knows for sure. But the very secrecy surrounding its discovery, the unusual condition of the wreckage, and of course, the classified silence after the recovery of artifacts, have caused many seasoned experts and independent researchers to raise their eyebrows with suspicion. Too many coincidences. Too many mysteries to simply consider it chance. This was something far more sinister and planned. So what consensus exists regarding this blood-curdling mystery? The answer depends on whom you ask, as everyone clings to their own, in their opinion, uniquely correct version. The mighty U.S. Navy still, with a tenacity bordering on fanaticism, adheres to its long-standing, official theory of destruction by destroyers. They have had it in their records for decades, and, it seems, will not budge an inch or a millimeter. But alas, divers, intrepid shipwreck historians, and many independent experts, those who have seen the truth with their own eyes, decisively lean towards the circular run explanation, to the version of a fatal torpedo. The internal damage, eerily sealed torpedo tubes, the absolute lack of irrefutable evidence of combat engagement, all of this forms a sinister, yet so plausible picture. Not perfect, of course, but close enough to seem the only correct one. This was only the 11th, deepest blow, which cast doubt on everything we thought we knew about the war. So who actually sank U-869? Was it a fatal error, a terrible suicide from within, a catastrophic malfunction that turned its own ordnance into a weapon of destruction? Or was it a hidden but merciless killing from above, a silent strike that history simply lost in its endless archives? The truth, perhaps, still lies there, deep in the pitch black, rusting in absolute ominous silence, waiting for someone to dare to raise it. But one thing is absolutely certain. This is not just the story of some unfortunate submarine, lost in time and space. No, this is a story of overwhelming uncertainty, of how even the coldest and seemingly long-closed case can still burn with searing questions, like hot coals, and of how sometimes even the fathomless, merciless ocean cannot forever bury the truth, for sooner or later it breaks through to the surface, challenging all dogmas, two theories, missing critically important records, and the ominous whisper of a secret clandestine mission. But there is no clear, definitive answer. And what if the wreckage itself was not just evidence, but a message we were never meant to find, a message waiting for its fearless readers? It is easy, too easy to think of World War II as something distant, frozen in textbooks, documentaries, or old black and white newsreels. Almost a century has passed, an entire human lifetime separates us from those bloody events. And with such a vast distance between then and now, it's tempting to believe that all great stories have already been told in minute detail, that every mystery has been revealed, every hero named, every battle documented down to the last bullet. But then, like a clap of thunder, the discovery of U-869 crashed down, and it didn't just rewrite one line in some dusty naval report. No, it called into question the very idea that history is ever truly complete and final, because here, in the very heart of the Atlantic, lies this immense silent piece of military equipment, lost in time like an alien from the past, sitting just hours off the Jersey coast, and no one, absolutely no one, neither the mighty U.S. Navy, nor seasoned German historians, nor even the desperate families of the crew, had the slightest, not even a ghostly, idea of its existence. It was a monstrous historical misconception. Spanning half a century, this was only the 12th deepest blow, which changed our perspective on history. And when we finally found it, it wasn't thanks to some government-sponsored expedition with a multi-million-dollar research grant or a mighty battleship sweeping the ocean. No, it was just two guys with an ordinary boat, one shared dream, and an incredibly dangerous obsession with the truth. That's what makes this story so amazing, so grand. It wasn't about military might or historical prestige. It was about pure, unstoppable, all-consuming curiosity that made them risk everything. Of course, technology certainly helped. Modern side-scan sonar, advanced mixed gases for diving, high-tech mapping software, all of this played a colossal role in locating and exploring the sunken vessel. But technology is merely a tool. It is only an extension of human thought. True, indomitable human determination made this discovery possible. It was people like John Chatterton and Richie Kohler who spent hundreds of hours risking their precious lives simply to answer simple, yet crucial questions. What was this submarine? And why was it there? And when they finally determined it was U-869, the story took on an entirely new, heart-wrenching dimension, because it was no longer just about war, about tactics and strategies. No, it was about 56 young men, barely out of boyhood, sealed in that steel tomb beneath the icy Atlantic for 5 whole decades. They had names, they had families, they had lives that, it seemed, would never make it into dry history textbooks. The divers didn't just find a submarine, they found them. Inside the wreckage, everything remained in place. Personal duffel bags, worn uniforms, faded photographs, a rusty harmonica. You could see, as if through a prism of time, the frozen moments of their lives. It was no longer about Nazi insignia or military strategies. It was about what it was like to be human amid something as vast, as relentless, and as horrific as World War II. These were guys who probably wanted to go home as badly as anyone on the other side of the war, on the other side of the front lines. And the ocean kept their story, just waiting for someone to come looking, someone to dare to break its eternal silence. And thanks to these brave divers, the voices inside this steel tomb were finally heard, resounding through decades of silence. Personal belongings, sealed torpedo tubes, and that very mirror which perhaps reflected someone's last gaze. This was the part that haunted the divers most, the poignant, heartbreaking intimacy of the place. Everyone was struck by how much was preserved, as if time had frozen at the moment of disaster. The Atlantic Ocean, cruel as it is, held the wreckage sealed like an untouched time capsule. Low oxygen levels, icy water, the lack of light, all of it created an ideal environment for preserving what should have disintegrated decades ago. Rubber seals still clung to locker doors. Paper documents, though fragile, were still there. Even some clothing, such as uniforms with Nazi emblems and name patches, remained intact. It is difficult to reconcile these ominous symbols with the personal items nearby. This made everything unbearably real, not in a political sense, but in a painfully human one. These were not textbook characters. These were frightened young people trapped in a steel tube, ordered to fight for a crumbling empire. Some of them likely believed in their cause. Others did not. But in the end, it didn't matter. The ocean didn't care whose side you were on. It took them all. U-869 was no longer just a submarine. It was a memorial that waited, buried beneath the waves, until someone came looking. And thanks to these divers, the voices inside were finally heard. It's horrifying to even think how many other submarines, how many ships, or even entire military units from that war and from other earlier conflicts, still lie somewhere in the boundless ocean, forever lost and unknown. Their stories, their tragedies are buried under a thick layer of silt and an impenetrable veil of secrecy, awaiting their time. With every found wreck, with every recovered artifact, we don't just add some dry information to history textbooks. No, we make history more real, more tangible, more human. We make it bleed with living emotions. This is why this incredible story is so important, so critically significant, not because it's merely dramatic, though it certainly is, but because it is a true wake-up call for all humanity. It mercilessly reminds us there are always new, unexplored layers in the past, always unread pages, always people whose stories have yet to be told, whose voices have not been heard. The discovery of U-869 did not end with the mundane identification of a submarine. Oh no, it inaugurated an entirely new, thrilling chapter in how we think about World War II, about naval warfare, about countless lives caught between a rock and a hard place. So, the next time you hear about divers seemingly finding just old wreckage, remember, that wreckage might be the eternal resting place of someone who never came home, who never left their name in the world they left behind. And thanks to fearless people like Chatterton and Kohler, and the incredible technologies that assisted them, we gain a unique opportunity to give these stories a second life. We have the right and the duty to remember the people who were not generals, or leaders, or celebrities. They were simply children in uniform, who silently followed orders and vanished into the boundless, merciless sea. The bitter truth is that the ocean forgets nothing. It keeps every secret, every monstrous mistake, every sorrow, every tear. But now, finally, we have the tools and the will to ask it for answers. And sometimes it answers, what do you think truly happened to U-869? Was it destroyed by its own weapon in a tragic, monstrous twist of fate? Or did Allied forces deliver that very blow that history simply lost? Share your theories in the comments. We sincerely thank you for staying with us throughout this incredible, captivating video. If you find our work important, if these stories resonate with your heart, please support our channel by liking and subscribing, as this is invaluable to us. Also, to not miss the next, even more shocking news update, and to always be at the heart of events, you can click the bell for notifications. See you soon in new depths of history.